You're listening to RetRead Podcast. I'm Anna.
I'm Serge, and we're here to talk about books we've read.
Hope you enjoy. Hey, Serge.
Hey, Anna. I am super excited that we got to interview our first author of the year. And honestly,
Of the year, ever.
the interesting thing about this is I don't often give out 5-star ratings on my Goodreads. The way I look at it is very simple. 3 stars is I really like the book, but I'm not sure if I want to recommend it. And then 4 stars is I really like the book and I think everybody would enjoy it. So a 5-star rating is I really like the book and I think it's a must read. I don't hand that out very often. And then lo and behold, January this year, I read a book that is a 5-star. I really enjoy it, and I'm telling everybody, if you're a fan of science fiction, this is a must-read. I think it's a groundbreaking novel here that is really moving the art forward, and to be able to speak to the author and actually debate back and forth to figure out what their thoughts are regarding that book and how they wrote it was such an honor and a privilege. I think it's one of the most amazing things that this podcast has brought to me personally thus far. You know what? I just talked about a book that I liked very much, and I know that you've read a book that you also very much enjoyed very recently, so why don't you tell us all about that?
So I just read the book The Upside of Unrequited by Becky Albertalli. If you read YA books, then you have probably read her previous book, Simon versus the Homo sapiens Agenda. I read that book. I loved that book. And just like her last book, I think I said that one was like the dessert of books. Well, this one is basically the same thing. In this book, one of her characters makes edible cookie dough, and yeah, this book is basically edible cookie dough with ice cream. There's no nutritional value to it, but you read it and you enjoy it, and it's just a joy to read.
Tell me about the diversity of the book, because I know that's one of the aspects you really enjoyed about it.
Yeah, I really enjoyed how diverse the book was. I mean, if you just break down the characters, you have a Korean American who happens to be pansexual. You have multiple lesbian characters. You have mixed couples who are Jewish and black. It's a very diverse list of characters.
It sounds super diverse.
And it's not ham-fisted. They are what they are. They're not facing identity crisis. This isn't a book about a crisis. They've embraced their identity and they don't give a shit what anyone has to say. There are funny moments of people not sure if what they're doing would be considered a microaggression. One of the girl brings her girlfriend home to eat a meal with her moms, and one of her moms gets Korean fried chicken. Because, you know, Korean fried chicken is delicious.
I can speak to that. I love that stuff.
Yeah, so she gets Korean fried chicken, and the girlfriend just happens to be a Korean American. So the daughter and her sister are sitting there wondering, like, is this considered racist that our mom's doing that? Or is it just that she's doing a nice thing? And I just thought it was like a really funny little thing going on.
Oh, man.
There's also a funny scene where the grandma meets the girlfriend, and she just looks at her and goes, "Oh, you're an Oriental," and everyone's just horrified. Like, you can't say that. She's not a rug, you know? And as a Chinese American, please don't call us Oriental. Thank you.
That's lovely.
So it was nice to see this, like, list of diverse characters and just talking about things that other books would make such a after-school special book about. This book just embraced it, and it's just like, these are people who are living their lives. Deal with it. You should accept it too. And if you think this is abnormal, then
maybe you should just think about it a little bit.
Be a little more open. They actually discussed that there is a character who's a bit homophobic in the book. Aside from the characters being diverse, I did feel like they were extremely underdeveloped, which usually is a big red X for me for a book. But because I had so much fun reading it, I just sort of ignored it until I finished the book and went, what exactly were any of their motivations aside from getting a boyfriend, getting a girlfriend, etc.?
Well, that makes sense. I mean, you also described the book as literary dessert, and what is character development if not nutrients? And who cares about nutrients? We just want that sweet, fat, and sugar baby. Oh yeah.
Even if they were underdeveloped, I felt like the parents were present and they were aware of what was going on. You don't always see that in YA books, which is
Fear Street.
Yeah, exactly. That's one of my biggest criticisms of Fear Street. But also current YA books where the parents just sort of exist, but they don't know anything and they always know less than their children. And I feel like in Simon versus the Homo sapien Agenda, the parents are also very aware. So good on Becky Albertalli to just stay with that and not latch on to the YA norm of absent parents. I also like that this book is basically about sisters. You don't see many books that deal with the siblings who get along as well as they do. I think the last Fear Street book that had siblings, it was like a cluster cuss.
Yeah, I think it ended in attempted murder.
The friends really have each other's backs. Like, even when they have little squabbles, they're there for each other. It's always good to see. I love books that have strong friendships because everyone likes strong friendships.
Absolutely. I think when you come into adulthood, as we have, one of the things you have to hold on to is your friendships. Those bonds that you formed throughout your life end up becoming so important to you. And the people that have stuck by you through thick and thin become like family. I think when you're reading a book about friendship, that really reaches to a place that you care about.
Right, and even the conflict that happened in this book between characters, it made sense. I've read a lot of books where there is just trumped up drama for no reason at all, or just to help drive the plot, and it doesn't always make sense. Like, everything that happened in this book made sense. I could see why it was happening. I felt it worked. It was very organic, and I enjoyed that. This book is from Molly's point of view, and I felt her inner monologue. A lot of it was like frustrating to read, but at the same time, it's like super relatable. Like, she's having these thoughts and things are happening, and you're just sitting there and going, Molly, this could be so much easier if you just opened your mouth and said something. But she has anxiety and she's too scared to do it. And as an adult, you're just like sitting there going, no, it's fine. You can overcome it. It's great. But then you just sit back and think about when you were a teenager, when you were 17 years old, and how you felt then. And you're just like, yeah, it was probably very similar.
Yeah, you didn't know that it was going to get better.
You didn't know how the things that you made mountains out of were seriously just anthills.
It's funny how, as you grow older, the things that didn't seem important or significant become more significant, and the things that seemed to be significant back then become less so. Things just change over time.
But yeah, the Upside of Unrequited, I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. I don't know if it's a solid 4, maybe a 3.75. It's a good book. I had a lot of fun reading it. It is the literary equivalent of shoving yourself full of ice cream.
Listen, there is no shame in loving a little sugar in your life. Everybody needs a little relaxation time, and honestly, I love it when books can provide that, when you can just kick back with a book and just have a great time. You know what? It doesn't have to be an eye-opening experience. It doesn't have to change your life. It just needs to be something that passes the time and gives you enjoyment.
Speaking of books that you can read for your enjoyment, after this intermission, we will talk about Fear Street, the Fire Game. Welcome back from the intermission.
Yeah, welcome back, guys, and I hope you're excited as we are to review this book.
Let's talk about prediction accuracy.
I, for once, had a very rare run of good luck with my prediction accuracy because, as you guys know, if you've been following along, I have been abysmal with my accuracy recently, but for once, I got a couple things right. So, first of all, we got a male arsonist. That's a no. Although, that's also a yes, because we have this guy that comes in and he starts lighting stuff on fire because he thinks it's fun. Is he the only one that lights on fire? No. Are only the male characters in the book that light stuff on fire? No. But there is a male arsonist. Now, is there a girl that is onto him? No. The main character suspects him, but he's not the main protagonist of the whatever. But we also have another girl who's onto the actual main arsonist. I'm actually kind of right on that. Also, it's like a split 50-50. I'm like kind of right, kind of wrong. Going into the murder weapon, fire, smoke, inhalation, and burn to death. So the person that died in this book actually died from a fire. He did not burn to death. There may have been smoke inhalation. It was determined by the coroner to be from a heart attack. It may have been a complete accident. I don't think anybody intended for him to die. there was also an interesting thing that I talked about, a flamethrower, if you guys listened to the last episode, and there was an intended murder victim that was meant to be burned alive, smoke inhalation, all this stuff, and also had a direct flame directed at her by the murderer, as if it was almost a fire thrower. Obviously, I'm not claiming I'm clairvoyant here, but I was really on a hot streak, and that flamethrower thing, I'm gonna claim that.
I didn't get the flamethrower blowtorch thing at all, so...
Props to me.
Props to you. I did say that it was a group of pyro teenagers trying to one-up each other in a fire game, and it gets out of hand, and I was pretty right there. I couldn't say anyone died in smoke or fire, so I had to guess stabbing, and no one got stabbed. I was wrong there. I said it was a male arsonist, and I'll take as much credit as you did for that. But I also said it wasn't Mario, from the Super Mario Brothers game, and there was no Bowser or Princess at the end, so yeah, I got props for that.
That's true. And I think I may have foolishly have said something like, oh, I bet there is, and you'll rue the day that you claimed there wouldn't be. And yeah, there wasn't anything remotely resembling Mario or Bowser. Although there was a kind of a prince in shining armor saving a princess aspect to it, wasn't it? Although the princess ended up being a little bit bent in the head. And we'll get into that later.
Yeah, I don't think he was a prince at all. There was no part of him that was prince-like.
Well, I mean, Mario's a plumber.
Yeah, but he's like a nice guy.
I'm trying to give you a little credit here on your prediction. You're arguing against me.
I said it's not Mario.
Never mind, I'm arguing against you.
Yeah.
Mario saved the princess, obviously.
Only if you beat the game. Have you ever beaten a Mario game?
No comment.
So what is the fire game about?
First of all, it's about spring. Thing is, it's springtime right now, and this book is set in the springtime. It's set in the springtime after the Halloween party, actually. Do you think Corey and Lisa have graduated yet?
Well, it's only springtime.
I know, but I mean, were they in school during the Oh,
yeah,
yes, they
Lisa
were.
Lisa was the one that was getting the crowd all hyped up about the party that
That's
no one else was invited to.
They have got to be seniors at this point.
Well, you start driving, your junior year of high school?
Yeah.
So Corey was driving in the first book.
The thing is, just a quick sum up. We got this new kid, Gabe. He's coming to town. He's from Central City, and he's bored. And we've seen this before, haven't we? So the last kid we got from Central City was acting up.
Chuck, from The Wrong Number.
Yeah, he got in a fight his first day of school. You know what? Gabe is no different. He thinks he's better than all the small town kids. And so he decides he's gonna act out and be all cool. He's gonna start this little game. Just a little game. Why don't we light stuff on fire? Before he comes to town, some of the kids accidentally start a fire, and he comes in, he's like, oh, you only accidentally started it? Listen, all the cool city kids are purposefully starting fires. It's something called arson. It's the new cool thing.
Let's get into the characters.
Okay.
The main character, her name is Jill Franks. She's tall and slim, long, thick black hair. She describes herself as having a bubbly personality. She has an older brother, Hal, who's been in college for the last 3 years. She has a cat named Mitty. She's a gymnast, which is pretty cool that we talked about Lisa and Corey, because Corey was on the male gymnastics team, and now you have Jill and her friends who are on the women's gymnastics team for the school.
There you go, the big connection. Although, there are many connections. This book, and I'm not sure this is the correct place to mention it, but this book is the most intertwined with the entire Fear Street series of any of the books I've read so far.
Without including characters from previous books.
That's true. Nobody's included, but the references just keep piling up, don't they?
Well, before we get into that, let's keep talking about Jill Franks.
I think she's a real down-to-earth character. I really liked how she tried to keep the group cohesive. If the teasing got too strong, she would chime in for the person that was being a little bit teased too much, which was usually one of the guys. There was 2 guys in the friend group, and they were a little bit over-enthusiastic about one of the girls, maybe, possibly, but the thing is, we didn't see that in the book too much. The thing is, they were both a little bit awkward guys, and they left themselves open to a little bit of ridicule, and Jill would be the one that was chiming in on their side if their ridicule got a little bit too much. Although, obviously, a little bit of friendly jabbing back and forth is par for the course in a friend group such as this.
I don't think she lived up to the previous female protagonists we've had in Fear Street books.
we've had some superhuman female protagonists on Fierce 3 up till now. And the thing is that Jill, she's just one of us. Honestly, she's the character that you read and you go, I don't think I could have done better. Whereas you read some of the other protagonists and you go like, damn, you're doing good. If you're reading the entire series, it's nice to get those really James Bond, whatever characters they're like, doing all the stuff and figuring everything out. But once in a while, it's nice to see a character that's down to earth, isn't as tuned into everything. It's just easier to associate with.
Well, I think one difference is those protagonists from the other books were able to save themselves from the situation at the end, whereas she needed the saving.
That's true.
So it's similar to the stepsister who also needed to be saved.
Right. Or, for example, the Sleepwalking book. A little bit.
A little bit. Even if that crazy guy wasn't at the door, the cops were there pretty quickly too.
Right, but, you know, in the Sleepwalker, she never really figured out what happened until the end, right?
She knew. Remember she pretended?
Oh, right on, yeah.
She was wrong until the end, is what I'm going to say about her. She needed to be rescued, and she was completely wrong in her assumptions of what was going down. Whereas I think other Fear Street protagonists figured out their shit pretty quickly, except for Stepsister. Well, I think this follows the vein of Stepsister, where she got the whole story wrong, and she needed to be saved.
I mean, there's lots of Fear Street books where nobody figured anything out until the very end. For example, our last book, Ski Weekend, who figured anything out?
Aereo did. Remember, she was in the basement, and then Red came down. And,
right, and
I mean,
that was
he told her, but
that was at the very end of the book, pretty much.
It was a good amount.
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't as close to the end as this one, but It was near the end. I mean, like, I'm not taking anything away from Ariel. She was badass. Way more badass than Jill,
well,
obviously.
Even the new girl, I guess Corey didn't know until the very end either.
He didn't.
Yeah. But he rescued himself.
Right. I found Jill's character very relatable. She was just kind of average and run-of-the-mill. Her inner voice pretty much matched up with my inner voice. The way she leaned towards one suspect versus another suspect matched the way I leaned as well. And so I identified with her quite easily.
I think she is easily identifiable in that sense, but I do think she will be forgettable in the whole cast of characters within the Fear Street series. I mean, I think there's some characters like Nikki or Ariel or even Ricky Shore, I don't know why I know his full name, that are just instantly memorable. And I think Corey and Lisa have been drilled in our heads so often that they will be forgotten.
Right.
But I do think Jo, even if she's mentioned again, I don't think she'll really stick it to my mind.
We will see. Mayhaps she will reappear in future Fear Street.
Mayhaps. Next up, we have her friend and fellow gymnast, Andrea Hubbard. She's described as bouncy and muscular with boy-short red hair. She's also very chill, likes joking around, but at the same time, she has a very volatile personality, so I don't really think that makes her very chill, but whatever.
Listen, she decides that she likes Gabriel, and that's all there is to it. And so she's gonna go after this guy. That's basically her main character trait. Also, she's going to be training for the state finals. So she's really close to making the state finals. Or maybe she made the state finals, and if she wins the state finals, she's going to nationals.
She needs a new song for her floor routine.
And Diane suggests that, hey, my friend Gabriel's coming to town, and maybe he can do the song for you, because he's really good with songs.
Now that you've brought her up, let's talk about their friend Diane Hamilton, who is also a gymnast.
Yeah, she's new to Shadyside.
She's described as shy and petite, with brown hair, very calm and serious. And they also describe her as sweet several times. They call her the sweetest girl ever. She hates fire. She just has a visceral reaction towards fire.
You find that right away when their friends Max and Nick surprise them in the library with a bunch of lighters. They had watched a bunch of B-movie horror flicks the night before
from the 1950s.
And we've all seen those, the Attack of the Killer Tomatoes, stuff like that. The one they watched was something about like the Human Torch.
Yeah, it's called The Torch. I looked it up. There's no horror movie called The Torch. There is a movie called The Torch, but it's about not setting things on fire.
Right, and so they end up having a duel with these, I guess, like butane flame lighters. They accidentally set a folder on fire, and Diane just runs screaming out of the room like, oh my god! This is the very beginning chapter of the book, and what happens is Andrea just shakes the folder until it stops burning, and she just throws it in the trash can, and immediately, like as soon as I read that sentence, I was like, are you freaking kidding me? And so I was like not surprised one single bit when later on the fire alarm goes off. I'm like, oh yeah, obviously the trash can is on fire that she threw it into.
That fire is what they try to impress Diane's friend from Central City who's just moved to Shadyside, Gabriel. They want to impress him by saying, well, cool things do happen in Shadyside, and the wastebasket in the library caught fire, and we did that accidentally. So this is a great time to talk about Gabriel from Central City.
Yeah, and Gabriel acted all cool like, oh, well, you guys only did that accidentally.
The height of entertainment in Shadyside is the trash can in the library catching on fire accidentally. Wow, this is so much better than the city, guys.
Yeah, this guy's literally casting shade on Shadyside.
He was Diane's old neighbor from Central City. They've been friends since kindergarten. He's described as devilish, wild, funny, sweet with the greenest eyes you've ever seen. Every girl who sees him falls in love with him, apparently.
That is actually proven in this book because we don't see any other girls see him, and every girl that we do see him kind of
fall in love with him.
A little bit, to some extent. There's some conflict there. Some of them are like, do I really love him? I'm not sure. Is he really right for me? One of them is like really gung-ho.
He actually, during their whole arson fire games, sets a shack on Fear Street on fire.
Right.
That's pretty extreme.
And this is how I can claim my accuracy prediction by saying like, hey, there's a male arsonist. There is a male arsonist in this book. The male arsonist is Gabriel.
We also have other male arsonists because in this game as well are the two guys that we had talked about previously who watched the torch and accidentally set the wastebasket on fire. First you have the swimmer, Nick Malone. He's tall and skinny. He never actually sets anything on fire. But his friend, Max Bogner, who's described as stalking around, his face is always red for some reason. He sets the boys' bathroom on fire. He found cleaning solution in the bathroom. He lights it on fire. He runs out and the bathroom just explodes. The door gets blown off the hinges. It's pretty extreme. Nick does set the initial folder on fire, but that's not part of the arson games. That's sort of just their own little, we just saw a movie.
Yeah, but I guess in the end of the day, everybody sets something on fire, except for Jill.
What did Andrea set on fire?
Her soul.
Yeah, so I think these are all the characters.
All right.
Should we get into the in-depth plot?
Yeah, I think we should. I think this book has a lot of in-depth plot for us to discuss.
Gabe is the one that basically starts the arson game. Nick is the one who accidentally lights the first thing on fire. But who's the one that takes it out of hand?
So we have really somebody you don't expect taking the arson game to the next level. Although I guess you saw it coming the whole time.
When you first meet Gabe, all the kids are at Pete's Pizza. Gabe walks in, and she's like, oh my god, Gabe! And she's so happy to see him. And immediately the other two girls, Jill and Andrea, are totally like, oh, he's hot.
Right.
And then they start asking her about Gabe, and when can we hang out with him, and when can he help, Andrea with the music for her gymnastics routine. And immediately, Diane just shuts down and goes, oh, it's not time yet. No, I don't like him. No. Because you had noticed that
when Diane brings up Gabe to her two best friends, she really talks him up to be this really wonderful looking person who's also a wonderful person. He's into music, he's into sports, he's very talented, like greenest eyes anybody's ever seen, right? So she sounds like she really likes the guy, basically. And Andrea's like, hey, listen, I think I really like him. Do you mind if I go after him? I know it seems to me like maybe you like him too, and I'll back off if you want me to.
Which is really solid for her to do.
Right.
I think it's really considerate.
And what that ended up earning her was attempted murder. That's what she got for her trouble. She almost got killed. I think Diane expected that Andrea would be dead.
Yeah, she thought she would never wake up. I think we're jumping the gun here. What happens?
Yeah, how did it all devolve? Everything falling apart. It really became like a complete clusterfuck. And it's all because of Diane's past and the trauma she went through. And this, I think anybody could have figured out. Even I figured out that, oh yeah, she must have severe burns scarring her body. This was very clear from the beginning, just the way she acts. She doesn't want anybody to see her body. She's always wearing long sleeves, long skirts, the whole thing. She always freaks out if anybody, like, even potentially might see something.
There's that scene in the mall
where
Diane's in a dressing room and Andrea wants to try something on. She doesn't know Diane's in the dressing room. She opens the door and from across the store, Joe can hear her, get out, like a frantically.
And a scream.
And a scream.
Yeah.
And Joe, like, runs over and Andrea's like, I accidentally walked in. I don't know why she freaked out that much.
Right. She wasn't even in a state of undress at that point, and she still freaked out. The other thing you notice right away in the very first chapter is, oh, she's really afraid of fire. So, okay, you put two and two together. Okay, yeah, anybody can figure that out. What I didn't figure out, I guess, is the deep mental scars that incident left. Turns out she's really screwed up. In a weird way, too, with regards to Gabe.
She was in her grandmother's house, and the kerosene heater blew up, and she got burns and scars all over her body. No one thought she'd make it.
Right.
So Gabe was there all the time when she was in the hospital, like, playing songs, bringing her homework, and hanging out with her. So, inevitably... Is it inevitable? I don't know. But she fell in love with him. Because she had fallen in love with him, and she had all these scars all over her body, she decided that she's just too hideous to be with him. Ever. She said, no. I'm too disgusting for him. But you know what? Just because I can't have him, it means no one else in the world can have him.
Right, so that's the part where I think she's kind of screwed up. That's a very, like, twisted frame of mind to be in.
That is very twisted.
I didn't see that coming. That perhaps one of the most twisted villains we've had. We had Halloween Party, which is referenced in this book.
Justine.
And Justine was pretty messed up. But she was like, you know what? Her uncle was the one that was, like, really messed up. And then she was like, you know, like a new convert to a cult. They're so zealous. That was her. She was like a new convert to the whole cult of getting revenge. And she, like, took it a couple steps too far.
In the first book, I forgot the name of the girl that Corey fell in love with, but she was pretty twisted.
Anna.
Yeah, Anna. She was pretty twisted. She killed her sister and then went on a whole other thing.
Right. Yeah, so I think Diane is on Anna's level.
Well, do you think that if Gabe had come and everything had been hunky-dory and her friends decided that they weren't into him, she would have been triggered? Or do you think, like, the moment anyone fell in love with him, she would have just, like, burned their house down?
Well, no. Yeah, see, that's the thing. I think the burning thing came from Gabe. I think Gabe himself says, oh, yeah, it must have been my fault because I started this stupid fire game.
No, but I'm asking, like, even with the game in play and all the boys had, like, set something on fire at some point or another, you know, the game had come to an end, and this was like several months later, do you think that in a few months, like over the summer, if let's say Lisa breaks up with Corey and starts dating Gabe, do you think that Diane would have flipped and burned Lisa's house down? Or do you think she was comfortable doing this because they were playing the games or because these were her so-called friends? How twisted do you think she was? Like any girl would have been, or just because they are her friends that she had to like take action?
That's a good question. I think my take on that is the fire game definitely would have triggered some kind of weird reaction from her. She would have done something. Would it have resulted in attempting to murder her friends? Probably not. That was probably due to the whole Gabe jealousy thing, but she might have done something else crazy. Just to sidetrack, I think Corey and Lisa are probably graduating this year, so she wouldn't be dating Gabe. Also, they're going to be together forever, get married, and have 10 beautiful little children. So, yeah, I don't think she's going to be breaking up with him. Is this the part where we want to mention the fact that Nick and Max are really into these cruddy 50s movies?
Well, we talked about it when we first introduced the book. But yeah, they're into like really cruddy B-movies. They saw a movie called The Torch, which is what started this whole setting things on fire thing. The plot of the movie that's described in this book sounds pretty interesting, doesn't it?
There's a good torch who can shoot fire from his fingertips, and somehow he can turn this power to good. I can't imagine how, but whatever. And then it turns out that he has an evil twin.
Okay, but you know how you said you can't see how he could be a good torch?
Mm-hmm.
You know what I immediately thought of?
What?
The fireman.
Oh my god, right.
Because he was a good torch.
Yeah, you're right. He was a good torch. Jeez.
Wait, Joe Hill, did you get your idea from this Fear Street book?
Oh my god.
Are we onto something?
Yeah, I mean, it makes sense. If you copy your plot idea for your novel from a fictitious 50s B movie, you're gonna end up with a second-rate novel, so I guess...
But no, you're copying your idea from a fictitious B movie in a book written for teenagers. Like, it's not a real movie. It's a B movie that was invented in this book.
No Mary Poppins references in this book, though, so...
Well, he had to add something original.
Diane is really crazy, and...
She wants to set Andrea up for all the arsons that she is starting. So they have a girls' night and they find out that Andrea's dad bought her a new laptop computer and a printer, and the printer he only bought her a blue ink ribbon.
Interestingly enough, by the way, it's referred to as a blue ink ribbon throughout the book, except when she first shows it off, and then it's called an ink cartridge.
Yeah, that was a little weird. Her dad bought her a blue ink cartridge because he thought it was cool, so anything she prints out is blue ink. Yeah, you gotta remember that little fact, because at one point, Jo needs Nick to tutor her in algebra. Before she had arranged a study date with Nick, she had gone out on a date with Gabe, and someone had set Gabe's car on fire, and she thinks it's Nick getting revenge for Gabe calling him, like, a pussy, and not willing to set something on fire. So she's all mad at him, and then they, like, make up, and he agrees to tutor her. The day of the tutoring, he's, like, leaving the house, and she's like, this is not him making it up to me, what's going on, and why are they, like, sneaking off somewhere, and I need to follow them. So she gets to Fear Street, her car stalls, and engine floods, and by the time she gets to where Nick and Max are, they're running away from this house that is burst into flames. And she's like, what the fuck? I knew it. He is a pyromaniac, and this confirms that he set Gabe's car on fire.
She calls him up to confront him.
Yeah, she calls him up to confront him, and he's like, I don't know what you're talking about. So she goes there with Diane. He and Max each give her pieces of paper, and they're like, we got this paper in our mailbox, and it said, go to this address at this time. And they look at the paper and it's printed in blue ink. So they're like, we know only one person who would have a printer that can print in blue ink.
And so they go over to Andrea's house and accuse her. And this goes about as well as every other
accusation
in this entire series. Kids, don't accuse your friends of murder. It's really bad for the relationship.
When you start accusing your friends of that, your best friends at that, you may have crossed a line. Jill goes wild with accusing every single one of her friends with something heinous.
She never accused Max of anything.
You put Nick and Max in the same little group. I mean, first she accused Nick of burning down Gabe's car, then she accuses Nick and Max of burning down the house, then she accuses Andrea of burning down the house.
Nick and Max went to the house together, and she basically accuses Nick and assumes that Max was the bystander. So Gabe is like a fountain of wisdom in this book. This guy from the city, he's all sophisticated, stuff. So at one point he says, I can get behind that. No one wants to believe something bad about someone they care about.
So that quote's pretty funny because you never want to assume your friends have done something.
Nobody, I'm sure, wants to believe that Diane would be capable of killing
What I think
Andrea.
is interesting, so let's keep moving with the plot, right? And I'll go back to this later. After they accuse Andrea, Joe goes home and Andrea calls her and says, listen, I know what's happening. Meet me at the gym tomorrow. And Joe goes to the gym and Andrea's not there, but Diane's there. And they're both like, well, yeah, Andrea called us. She's not here. Let's just do some gymnastics. And they're doing some floor routines. They look over to the balance beam and there's Andrea's body. She's still alive, she's still breathing, she's unconscious, she has to go to the hospital, and people aren't sure if she's gonna make it. They have another group meeting, and Jill's like, listen, we know what happened. Andrea did all these heinous things, and then she tried to kill herself so no one would find out. And the group is like, what the fuck? Mm-hmm. And then Jill makes another leap of logic and says, no, someone found out about us and they're doing copycats. Gabe is like, no, it's one of us, obviously. How stupid can you be?
Right, I guess that this is the quote comes right after that group meeting.
After that, Joe doesn't know what to do, and then she's like, "It must be Gabe who did it. We're gonna have to confront Gabe." So she calls Diane up, and Diane's like, "Yeah, you're right, but come to my cabin first, and we'll chill and have fun and whatever." She's like, "Okay, yeah, I need to relax."
Yeah, well, you know what happens though. This is when she confides in Diane and tells her that she actually has a date with Gabe. That's how she gets the invitation to the cabin. At this point, I'm pretty sure I already figured out it was Diane.
Yeah, I hope you would have. It was pretty obvious at this point. So they're in the cabin, and there's a phone call. Diane's in the shower, so Joe picks it up. "Hello?" she said. "Hi," said a wonderfully familiar voice. "Andrea," cried Joe. "How are you?" "Recovering," said Andrea. "The doctors say I'm going to be fine." "Sort of blows your little plan to pieces, doesn't it?" "What are you talking about?" said Jill. "I'm so happy you're all right." "I'll bet you are," said Andrea. "But you can quit pretending." I know it was you. When you didn't show up, I started warming up on the beam. Probably just as you thought I would. The next thing I knew, someone hit me from behind. It had to be you. Jill felt a jolt of fear run down her spine. Andrea, she said carefully, you're not making any sense. You've had a bad head injury. Maybe you ought to get a good night's sleep and we can talk in the morning. Andrea laughed. I may have a head injury, she said, but I don't have amnesia. And I've had a lot of time to think. I know you printed the notes too. The day you came over to my house, I know everything, Diane. Diane, gasped Jill. Andrea, this is me. Jill. Andrea has laid out everything to Jill at this point. And later she goes on and tells Jill, like, you need to get out of there. Diane's dangerous. Like, this is a dangerous situation. Now, Jill, this lovely girl who has accused every single one of her best friends for murder, like people she's known longer than Diane, sort of just sits around and stares and goes, oh my goodness. And then she's like, okay, you're right. I have to leave. She's probably a horrible, evil human being. And she runs away. And then she gets lost in the woods because she doesn't have a light source, and Diane manages to find her and goes, hey, where are you going?
Well, Diane probably stole her car keys.
Yeah, Diane already stole her car keys at this point. I mean,
she has to run off without her car and...
follow the road?
A, follow the road. B, she also comes up with the idea to follow the shoreline, but she does neither of those things. Instead, she just runs into the woods.
She runs in a circle around the cabin, I think. I think that's what happens.
Right, and somehow Diane tracks her down. That's kind of creepy.
Well, no, because Diane came out with a light. So Jill has this bright idea to just follow the light and say, hey, help me. And it's obviously Diane because she's literally right next to the cabin.
I can't believe she did that. But also Diane was able to follow her footsteps somehow, or footprints. She's like a ranger from the north or something.
But the funny thing is, Jill has this internal thought where she's like, you know what? Everything's just crazy. Diane's fine. I'm going to go back in. And then she starts telling Diane everything Andrea said to her. And as she's like telling her everything Andrea said, she goes, oh my god, it probably was you. And it's like, this girl tried to kill Andrea already. What are you doing? Stop talking. Stop talking. Stop talking and walk away. What are you doing?
This was such a scary part of the book for me. There's such an intense scene where they're finally confronting each other. It's kind of nuts, actually. Well, first of all, after they come back to the cabin, Diane makes tea for her, and they drink some tea together and sit down and talk about all of Diane's murderous plans. But I just thought the tea was a really nice touch. And at the end of that conversation, Diane's like, well, as you've probably figured out, it's all true, and now I have to kill you, and it's too late, or something like that. And I thought, oh, the tea must have been poisoned. But no, it wasn't poisoned. That would have been the smart move for Diane, I guess. Instead, she decides she's gonna get an improvised flamethrower and try to, like, flame Jill, and then she gets this crazy look on her face, and she says, feel the pain, Jill! Diane cried, feel the pain! And then it goes on to talk about how the blowtorch singes her and she screamed and lunged around, whatever. And there's another scene where Diane throws off her bathrobe, so Jill sees her basically whole body is just covered in scars. At this point, she's like a cartoon villain or something.
It's almost cinematic in a way. Like when you read it, you can actually see it happening on a screen because this is something that you see in movies and cartoons.
Yeah, but also, did she just get out of the shower, throw on a bathrobe, and then go outside to try to track down Jill?
Yes.
Jeez, she like didn't even put on any clothing. She's just like traipsing through the cold spring air in like nothing but a bath. Probably didn't even dry her hair yet. She's gonna catch a cold like that.
No, I think she made everything nice and warm.
Nice and toasty.
Yep. Yeah, she's slightly unhinged.
Feel the pain.
When I say slightly unhinged, I mean she kind of lost it. But I just think it's funny, like, all the running in the woods, Jill just could not, like, grasp the fact that Diane was at fault. She's already blamed everyone else. You might as well just land on Diane and go, yeah, it is time for me to go. Instead of panicking in the woods, just follow the road out. And also, even when she went back to the cabin, Andrea had already laid it out. Diane's in love with Gabe.
Yeah.
That's why it happened. All she had to say was, you know, I'm not really interested in Gabe, and, you know, he's kind of scary to me, and I just don't want to be part of this at all. That's all she had to say. And instead, she just, like, ranted on and on about how, like, oh yeah, Andrea told me this, and oh my god, you are crazy. Like, why would you do that to someone? Like, say that.
Yeah, so she ends up surviving because Andrea called Gabe.
Yeah, and Gabe, like, rushes over and saves the day.
Yeah, he saves both of them from dying in that fire. Because they probably were both going to go and then die. Both Diane and Jill.
Yeah, and he takes the blame for basically setting Diane off.
And it looks like he's going to be there for Diane in the end.
Yeah, I don't think he's going to end up with her in any way, shape,
right,
or
I'm
form.
saying he's going to visit her in prison or wherever she ends up. So that's basically the plot.
Who were you blaming the entire time up until you figured out, or until it was laid out that it was...
For a while I wanted to blame Andrea because she really gloats about the car getting set on fire after the hot date between Jill and Gabe.
I do think it's pretty cool how chill she was about Jill dating Gabe as well.
Yeah.
She was like, well, may the best, person win. I mean, she was kind of bitchy about it, but at the same time, it's like, she didn't set Jill on fire because of it. She was like, it was just a normal, he'll pick one of us.
So I did suspect her for a while there because of that car. That was definitely something on my mind. At one point I suspected Mitzi because I have a...
Mitzi the cat?
Yeah, so I have a note here on page 114 and it says, it was all Mitzi. I'm not sure why I put that, but...
Was this the part where she had the dream?
That was a messed up dream. At one point, Jill has a nightmare where somebody has set Mitzi on fire inside the stove.
What does R.L. Stein have against cats?
Oh my god, right. This is another cat murder. Well, not in actual life.
Dream one, but still.
Here's another interesting thing. Diane can't have a pet because her dad has allergies, but she actually likes animals and she always visits the pet store at the mall.
Yeah, I think R.L. Stein was just trying to set her up as like the sweet, thoughtful, sensitive, kind person that we're supposed to think she was.
Yeah, I think there's another reason she can't have animals. I think she'd end up barbecuing them. We were talking about Andrea and how chill she is regarding the relationship issue. She also just seems like a pretty chill person as well. She says this cool thing, but I do think it's true that computers make you more creative. What do you think? Is Andrea right?
I think there is something to it. I think creativity was around before computers were invented.
That's true.
But I think computers have the ability to open... But they didn't have the internet back then, so... That's a completely different context. Because I think now, computers can help with creativity because it can introduce you to things that you otherwise would have never seen before.
Right.
Back then, pre-internet, I don't know if it makes you more creative. It's just another outlet for creativity. Because she had just written a poem on the computer, right? So that's what was the impetus for that. I mean, she could have written the poem if you gave her a piece of paper and a pencil, but I guess we're so used to doing different things when given paper and pencil. I mean, you can just doodle, you can scribble, you can write, you can do anything. But you put a keyboard in front of someone, and I guess the immediate reaction is to type. But if you have put a typewriter in front of her, wouldn't the same thing have happened? Theoretically?
No, because that computer can also do math and play games.
Right. We'll get to 90s things in a bit. But yeah, so I don't know if I necessarily agree based on the context of the quote, but I guess I do think so for now, because we wouldn't be doing this podcast without computers, and this is a cool creative thing. You do a lot of our graphic art on the computer as well, so I think that, computers have really helped us now. It's just easier to do. So I think it's not necessarily makes you more creative, it just makes it easier to have a creative outlet.
Nitpicks.
I think this was when the fire alarm, the first time they set something on fire in the school. Their fire alarm goes off, Joe's in class, and they have to walk out of the classroom. Now, we've all done fire drills in school, and they always say the same thing. Leave everything behind. Don't take anything. The first thing Joe does is she grabs her backpack, makes sure she has everything she needs, and leaves. So that's what everyone does. That's a nitpick I had. The fire marshals and your teachers would not let that happen.
My nitpick is, who the hell gets in a flame fight in the middle of a library? That was so horrifying. Just surrounded by dry paper everywhere.
I like how Joe does have an internal monologue where she mentions, I didn't realize how, everything was flammable until, a little bit into it. But then they all think Diane's overreacting. Why did she get so upset that we were playing with fire? It's even if she didn't have the phobia, you are literally lighting fires in a library.
Yeah, as soon as they tossed that burnt up folder into the trash can, I knew exactly what was going to happen. It doesn't take a genius to figure out that you don't throw something that's on fire into a wastebasket full of paper. Also, what's up with the flammable cleaning solution kept right by the bathroom sink or wherever? This is ridiculous. This is just the boys' room. Basically, Max wants to set the trash can in the boys' room on fire, except what happens is the whole bathroom basically explodes. I guess they're keeping some kind of cleaning solution, turpentine or something. And it's at my place of work, any kind of explosive or flammable liquid is stored in a fireproof metal cabinet. I believe that's the proper OSHA procedure for this kind of thing. I can't believe that the school is not doing that. What kind of fire marshal would allow this to be stored like that?
Well, my thinking was that maybe the janitor had just done something in the boys' room and he had stepped out for a second and that's what happened.
Even if the janitor needed to clean something, you're not going to take a whole drum of the stuff to do that.
I don't think he brought a drum.
You pour off a little squirt bottle and use that. That's not going to explode. This was clearly a very large container of this stuff. Blew the door off its hinges. So this isn't really a nitpick, but I want to give a shout out to Jill for taking Andrea's pulse and checking her breathing. I guess the kids here have really learned something since the surprise party. Remember that book where they basically leave somebody for dead and then he gets shot? This is probably the only smart thing Jill does in the book. Jill's character is one of the less capable heroines we've had so far. She really relies on her friends to help her out, which is also cool. It's nice to have smart friends like Andrea who can call you up and save your life. Can you imagine that? Like, if Andrea hadn't woken up from her coma right then and called her, that would have been it. Jill would have basically died a horrifying, painful death. Feel the burn, Jill. Feel the burn. Right? I mean, like, geez. She is the evil torch. And then Gabe is, I guess, the good torch.
I don't really think he was a good torch.
Well, he thought he was better than everybody.
Oh, I'm from the city. Okay, so how big is Central City? Can we get into that? So we established we're in, New England? Is Central City Boston?
No, Central City is Columbus, Ohio.
Okay. We'll just forget Ski Weekend never happened, and we'll bring Shadyside back to Ohio.
Yeah, I mean, Ski Weekend was a very standalone book. For all we know, they went to a different Shadyside High in, like, a different Shadyside that also had a Fear Street. Because they didn't actually mention anything about Fear Street. I think the girl lives on Fear Street, but I don't think they even mentioned that bad things happen on Fear Street.
No, she does.
Does she?
Yeah. Like, if in real life you lived on Fear Street, you're just gonna talk about, like, yeah, I've heard weird noises or whatever, because it's in the name of the street, right?
Right.
So let's just go with your thing, and they're from, like, Shadyside, Massachusetts, and we are back in Shadyside, Ohio.
Oh my god, there's two Shadysides.
Well,
Okay.
until we meet the characters from Ski Weekend again, we are just going to say that they live in another Shadyside.
What a great introduction to the Fear Street mythos with a brand new theory, the Two Shadyside theory. Let's just jump right in here. We have a long list of things to talk about for Fear Street mythos.
Yes, because Gabe, Mr. Central City himself, has decided that he's a big city kid, but now he's in, like, small town America, and there's nothing interesting in small town America. And the other kids decide that, well, he's not interested in any of our stores, he's not interested in any of our restaurants, but we have something different. We have Fear Street. They decide that they will give him a rundown of everything they know about Fear Street, but unlike the other Fear Street books, we don't have the massive hamsters, pack of rabid wolf humans, or whatever the heck.
He accuses Pete's Pizza of being second-rate, so they decide that they're going to prove to him that Fear Street is a first-rate haunted street. So they prattle off, like, this whole list of stuff that happened.
And he is as unimpressed as Chuck was in Wrong Number, where it's like, it's a street. And then they bring him there, and he's like, it's a street.
Yeah, they take him to the cemetery. He thinks it's kind of cool that some of the headstones are from the 1800s, and there's a thief buried there who got hanged to death.
He's still not impressed,
right.
per se.
But they talk about that thief, too. They're like, oh, he was only 18 years old. No, he's not impressed. His reaction is, why don't we just light this shed on fire for shits and giggles?
So what are the things they run down and tell him about?
So they mention the Halloween party, which happened last fall, according to this book. So this is the spring after Halloween party. This is one of the rare moments where we get a very concrete time and place. They mention the Wrong Number incident.
Diane talks about her two friends who were almost chainsawed to death around the corner.
That's what that was about. And then we have the house with green shutters, where 2 years ago, police found 6 skeletons buried in the backyard. Or maybe, they just buried their family in the backyard instead of in the cemetery. I don't know. That happens.
That does happen. Especially, that's an old neighborhood.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
Was it in the back of Simon Fear's house or something?
Right. And then there's a girl whose parents disappeared.
Did she disappear with her parents? Did they maybe move away? Maybe her parents were in the cult and they had to run away.
Maybe this is just a reference to missing.
The cult.
Yeah. No, but I mean, like, maybe they're just talking about the FBI parents. Oh, then they reappeared.
Yeah.
I see. Okay.
And then they also moved away.
Okay, so I bet this is the cult.
Yeah.
There's something else that happened regarding the cult here. You notice at one point the very helpful police officer who spots Jill's broken down car on Fear Street, and he has her pop the hood, he takes a look at it, he gets it going again. He seems to be very competent, doing a great job, and the one defining characteristic, he said he's super young, so he's fresh on the force. I'm guessing they had to hire a bunch of brand new people after half the department had to go to jail due to being in that crazy cult and missing. And so now maybe some response rates are going to get better.
Well, at one point I was like, is he really a cop or is he like some sort of weird Fear Street spirit? But then when the cops actually go to Jill's house, they actually mention like, well, we know you were there because one of our young new cops like saw you there and placed your license plate or whatever.
And we know where you live.
Another thing they tell Gabe is that the undead sometimes come out of the graves in the cemetery and roam your woods. That's not very...
I think they've been watching one too many 1950s horror movies.
Yeah, that's definitely a horror movie thing. Night of the Living Dead or something. At one point, but this actually falls into our Fear Street mythos, where when Jill is stuck in her car, she doesn't know what to do, out of the corner of her eye, she sees something like run into the woods, and she's like, oh, it looks like a dog.
Yeah, it's a dog running across a yard and into the woods. And then later on, she hears some howling.
So that goes into the whole...
Guardians of Fear Street.
They've come back. That's why I thought the policeman maybe wasn't a real cop, because I thought the dog had come, she saw the dog, and now a guardian has come.
Wouldn't it be funny if the man that died in that house is actually the guardian guy? I mean, it's not funny because he died, but if the man guardian of Fear Street never shows up again, then that was him in that fire that died. Otherwise, if he shows up again, then we'll beat our chests and go, yeah, we totally knew he was coming back. That's how this is going to go down. I want to talk about the fire response times. Theory A, this is our original mythos theory, the corporation, right? Is the fire department that good because the corporation is trying to protect its assets? And now we're going into, well, what kind of assets do they have at the school, right? And we actually had somebody contact us, the Paradox King has a theory that Shadyside High School is behind everything, since that's the one thing connecting everybody. Here we have a wastebasket fire, the fire department showing up almost as soon as the fire alarm goes off, which is unheard of. Basically, the kids are filing out of the classroom maybe like a minute after the alarm went off, and the fire department's already there disposing of the trash can. Is the firehouse right next to the school or something? I don't know if it's suspicious or not. It might be.
It's a small town, isn't it?
Right, there's also the fact that it's a small town, yes.
But let's play with the idea that Shadyside High is the focal point. How does it get to Fear Street?
Well, maybe they're experimenting on the students.
Well, I was thinking, you know how there's that Flint lead water crisis? And now all the schools are testing for lead in their waters?
Right.
What if there's something in Fear Street, Fear Woods, Fear Lake, and somehow that's leaching into the school? Like maybe, where do they get their water from? Aquifers? Is it maybe a pipe going through that area that gets contaminated and goes to the school? Like, is the drinking water for the school messing things up?
That's right. I mean, basically, they must be getting water, I guess, either out of the river or out of Fear Lake, and whatever mineral is in the ground there could be contaminating it. Or it could be done, on purpose to see what the effects are on humans. It's a top secret study. Obviously, nobody would actually allow this to happen. This very unscrupulous group of people that are conducting this experiment on the kids, and I guess maybe that's what's causing them to get so messed up.
Well, maybe they're testing the effects of the mineral deposits, because we know about the blue clay on Fear Street, and we know about everything that goes on there. Maybe everything is happening there, and now they're trying to distill what the actual effects are, and the only place they can think of testing it is Shadyside High.
Exactly.
And that's why we're seeing all these psychotic breaks from an abnormal amount of psychotic breaks in the students at Shadyside High.
Here's an interesting thought. Diane may be more susceptible to it. She moved from out of town, and she's probably unused to the effects of whatever they're putting in the water, and also she had that episode in her past, makes her a little bit more fragile.
And that does explain why the people on Fear Street are normal, because they've already adapted to what's going on.
Exactly.
That's also why the character from Haunted was able to see the spirit, because that brought that out, but she doesn't have any negative consequences from that herself.
You know what's interesting? Maybe there's an antidote to it, and it's like also in the soil there on Fear Street, but if you distill just the essence of the mineral without including the antidote, that's what messes you up.
Very interesting, corporation. Very interesting. Yeah, I don't think this experiment is going to pass any IRB review.
Yeah, no, this is definitely completely under wraps, and if all of this comes out, this is why they had that kid murdered in Halloween Party. I think he got a little too close to the truth with his science project.
And it does fit in because Justine did just move in, and maybe she was thinking of something like a normal sort of revenge thing, but living on Fear Street as an outsider who had just come in. That's what really messed her up.
And the corporation, because I think the corporation was using her, I think they probably just upped her dose.
Well, how do we reconcile that with the stepsister?
Okay,
Nancy had been living there
right.
her entire life, and she sort of had her psychotic break. Maybe she was just extra sensitive to it.
Yeah, obviously the stuff has some effects.
Right. And she was already in a stressful situation. I think it was one of those things where she was just in a bad place, and because of that, it was just easier to twist her thought process.
Yeah, that could be. Maybe you need to have, like, a traumatic event or something in your life to act as a trigger. That could be it.
Well, thank you, Paradox King, for adding to our theory. I think it makes a lot more sense when we look at it from that point of view of Shadyside High. If you have more to add, just please let us know in the comments.
Yeah, Paradox King, what great timing here, because this book kind of goes along with your theory. So thanks for the comment. And if anybody else has your own theory, please share it with us and everybody else in the comment section, or shout out to us on Twitter.
90s things.
This one had lots of great 90s things. They had like a top-of-the-line laptop computer with lots of power.
It can do calculations.
Play games!
And has a word processor.
OMG.
To get it to work, you have to turn it on.
Insert a disc.
The disc has to boot.
And then the cursor blinks.
And then it's ready for action.
This laptop apparently does not even have a hard disk drive. All it's good for is sitting in bed and watching a YouTube episode of Canoe Adventure.
Can it even handle YouTube?
No, of course not.
Okay.
But we had probably this laptop, or a laptop very similar to this, on one of our arts.
Yes, if you've seen our cover for Wrong Number on YouTube.
The problem with laptops, back then the LCD screens were really cruddy and would have been almost certainly a black and white screen and pretty low resolution. And LCD screens back then had really awful refresh rates. So she says it could play games. See, you probably wouldn't want to be playing a game on this laptop due to what is most likely a black and white screen. Your Commander Keen wouldn't look quite as good as you might want it to. And her setup in her room is sweet. She's got a TV, a VCR, and a CD player. And what else could anybody need?
A laptop and a printer.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. So she's going to be able to do her homework and print it out. That's nice. Guess her parents are pretty considerate getting her all those things.
You mean pretty rich?
Yeah, I guess so.
So when Jill sees the fire on Fear Street that she thinks Nick and Max have started, the first thing she does after driving away, she goes to the nearest firebox and pulls an alarm. What is a firebox?
I believe it is a hut where Smokey the Bear lives.
I mean, I put that under 90s things, but what is it a 90s thing? Like, do they exist now? Did they exist in the 90s?
I guess they did. Well, I guess the fire department, well, you know, if you don't have cell service, right?
Right.
Because cell service is getting blocked by the electromagnetic interference from all the mineral deposits under Fear Street, and you're the fire department that's owned by the corporation and tasked with protecting the resource, then you probably want to install fireboxes, right? Especially since phone service seems to be getting cut left and right all the freaking time on Fear Street. Very intermittent phone service.
But no, seriously, is this a 90s thing?
I have no idea what a firebox is.
So, hit us up in the comments below. What's a firebox?
Blue printer ribbon. Yeah, so dot matrix printers, I think, used ribbons. Do you remember those things?
Printer ribbons or the printers themselves?
Well, both.
My favorite thing about the Docs Matrix printers are the paper on the side you could rip off.
Oh, yeah. That was fun.
I loved doing that.
And the reason it's called a dot matrix is because each letter that it prints is actually composed of a bunch of little dots, like a little matrix of dots. I think they're basically just pins punching the tape. It works kind of like a typewriter, but instead of having like a bunch of different letters that punch into the tape, it's just a set of pins, and they form a different pattern depending which letter you want to print out.
What did you think of the book?
I liked it. It was interesting. We've mentioned this a couple times recently where we have found that R.L. Stine has a lot of strong female protagonists, and this is definitely merging as more and more of a pattern. You know, you can read into that what you want, but I think what I take away from this is the sort of stance on gender equality that he's taking here. And there's actually a passage in the book. This is where Jill finds out that somebody died in the fire. She's watching TV, and the anchor person is the one that announces that a homeless man died in the fire. It says anchor person. It's not anchor woman. It's not anchor man. It's an anchor person. It's just one word. You don't need to read anything into it. But because we're doing a thoughts on the book, and because we've been talking about the female characters in these books, I think you can start to get a feeling that R.L. Stine does have views on gender. And those views do get put down on the written page here. And we get to see kind of what idea he has. These books are really bad if you want to take the modern perspective. In terms of diversity, there is no diversity.
It's the complete opposite of the book I reviewed at the beginning of the podcast.
But if you want to talk about gender issues and gender roles, yeah, I would say he's taking a progressive stance, especially with his writing style, just the use of the word anchor person.
And not only that, if you just look at the characters in every book, they're strong female characters.
By the way, there are some sexist characters in this book, and they're basically described as crude and uncouth and just terrible people in general.
Which I do think it's important for a book series like this, because if you think about it, Fear Street wasn't marketed towards a specific gender, i.e. the Babysitter's Club books, people just imagine like girls read them. Fear Street was read by both, I think equally male and female. So you have early high schoolers reading these books with strong female characters over and over again. I think it does something.
Yeah, it must have had an effect.
You're expecting to read a horror book, but what you're really reading is something that shows gender equality, and I think that's a great message that R.L. Stine put out, whether people knew it or not.
Why don't we talk about other things regarding this book?
Yeah, so I did say that I thought it was Diane very early on during her and Gabe's first meeting in the pizza place, and then Diane's subsequent reactions towards Jill and Andrea's interaction with Gabe. It became very clear that it was a jealousy-fueled book, and everyone else was a red herring.
A very smart observation of you. Yeah, because I didn't catch that. So I guess you didn't see the balance beam thing coming, did you?
No, I did not. I thought that was going to be the end scene, where everything was going to come to a head, and Jill would find out it was actually Diane. Like, something would happen in the gym. I didn't think that Andrea would be taken out, and then there'd be another sequence after that.
That's basically where I 100% figured out it was Diane, because I still kind of suspected Andrea up till that point. And then, okay, yeah, I get it. Process of elimination, it has to be Diane. I think we already touched on the fact that the protagonists are not the smartest.
Yeah, but I do agree when you say it does make it more relatable in a sense.
Okay.
These are normal kids, and they did react. She checked a pulse and figured out her friend wasn't dead, so she didn't have beans for brains.
Right.
And that was normal.
Well, how would you rate this book?
Out of 5 used Bic lighters, I'll give it a solid 2.49. I don't think it's quite a 3-star book.
And this is on your
Fear Street scale.
Jeez, that's harsh. Because this book is like getting towards a 2 on my normal scale. I thought you were grading these on a curve.
I am grading these on a curve, and yeah, I think 2.49. I did think the end sequence was one of the more intense ones we've had recently.
It was super intense.
The blowtorch.
I reread the T chapter just because I wanted to make sure I really got it. It was pretty intense. Feel the pain. I don't know. Okay.
I think I just found it, for other books, like even for Ski Weekend, I did care about their plight a little bit. Oh no, how are they gonna get out of this? Type thing. Whereas for this book, I didn't really feel that up until the very end, where you're locked in this cabin with this crazy person with a blowtorch who's trying to kill you. But up until that point, I don't feel like there were many stakes. I felt like it could have been very easily resolved had they actually had a real conversation instead of like a pissing match, like over and over again.
Okay.
So I guess I had less sympathy for the characters, and because of that, I'm rating the book a little lower.
I guess I like the book a lot. I'm gonna give it a solid 1.7 disposable Bic lighters out of 5. That rounds it up to a 2. I thought it was a pretty solid book. It was a really intense final scene there. A lot of fodder for the Fear Street mythos. Some interesting characters. We've had a couple books in the past where the characters were just paper cutouts. And that wasn't the case here. You really got to kind of see a little bit more depth to most of the characters. It's very interesting. So I liked it. As far as the Fear Street book goes, it's a pretty good one.
So the next book is Fear Street, Lights Out.
Uh-oh.
It all happens in the dark.
Alright, so what's your prediction?
Let me describe the cover real quick. It's this girl in a hoodie. She's in jean shorts. She's running away from what looks like a swamp. It's a full moon. They're in Ohio, right? I don't think she's dressed for spring. This is not a spring outfit. This is definitely a summer outfit. The plot of the story, I think it's a girl on summer vacation from Shadyside High. She's running around in the woods. She looks scared. She's running from something. I'm assuming she's running from, like, a murderer. The murder weapon, well, let's see. The last one was a heart attack via fire. Have we had strangulation yet?
I don't think so.
But I don't think strangulation plays as well in this series. I've decided, like, that's why R.L. Stine doesn't want to do strangulation. He's just not playing as well. He needs, like, a gruesome, like, stabbing death with, like, blood. So I'm gonna say another stabbing. I'm gonna say stabbing with, let's go with a knife. And I'll say it's by a female, because he seems to like his female protagonists and female antagonists.
I'm gonna take a look at the cover now, and yeah, it looks like a really big moon. Well, okay, I guess this is the Fear Street Woods, and there might be a lake in the background, or like part of a lake. So I think this cover doesn't really give a lot of hints. For the plot, they must have gone into the woods. A group of kids went into the woods for some stupid reason or another. It's just spring or early summer, and what happens is there's a murderer. The murder weapon is either going to be a fist or like some kind of blunt object to the head. Just because of the book title, Lights Out, I think somebody's going to get knocked out. We don't always get the flamethrower theory that somehow ends up being sort of correct.
I can't believe that was right.
And for the murder gender, I'm going to go with male. Just keeping it simple.
Do you think the murderer is one of their peers? Or do you think it's going to be like Ski Weekend and just something totally random? Because I think it's a peer.
Yeah, I was actually leaning more towards random.
Oh.
So, yeah, there we go. Locked and loaded, guys.
Thanks for listening to our podcast. Like we said, if you want to contribute to our Fear Street Mythos, we'd love to hear what you have to say. Thanks for listening.
See you next time.
Thanks for listening to another thrilling episode of RetRead Podcast.
If you like what you hear, give us a shout out.
If not, let us know why in the comments.
Don't forget to rate, review, comment, share, like, and subscribe.
You can follow us at RetRead Podcast on Twitter and Facebook.
Or send suggestions or fan mail to red.read.podcast@gmail.com.
Until next time.
Peace!